I dreamed a dream in time gone by, and hope I thought God would be forgiving. But the come at night with their voices soft as thunder would be so different from this, so different now from what it seemed. Oh, life has killed a dream.
What if one movie could make you cry, cheer, and leave you speechless? Les Misérables 2012 hides incredible facts behind its unforgettable songs. Welcome to Kali Facts. Let's uncover them. Les Misérables is a famous French historical novel written by Victor Hugo. It was first published on March 31, 1862, and is widely considered one of the greatest novels ever written. Over the years, the story has become even more popular through many movie, TV, and stage adaptations, including the world famous musical. In English speaking countries, the book is usually called by its original French title, Les Miserables. However, it has also been translated with names like the Miserables, the Wretched, the Miserable Ones, the Poor Ones, the Wretched Poor, the Victims, and the Dispossessed. The story begins in 1815 and leads up to the June Rebellion of 1832 in Paris. It follows the lives of several unforgettable characters, especially Jean Valjean, a former prisoner who is trying to leave his troubled past behind and become a better man. His journey is filled with challenges, sacrifices, and moments that show the true meaning of redemption. The novel explores powerful themes like justice, mercy, forgiveness, and the difference between following the law and doing what is truly right. It also gives readers a deep look at French history, the streets and architecture of Paris, politics, religion, and moral values. Along the way, Victor Hugo tells emotional stories about family, friendship, sacrifice, and love, making Les Miserables a timeless classic that continues to inspire readers and audiences around the world. In 1815, Jean Valjean, Hugh Jackman, is finally released from prison after serving 19 years. He was originally locked up for stealing a loaf of bread to help feed his family, but his repeated escape attempts kept adding more years to his sentence. Even though he was one of the strongest and hardest working prisoners, his criminal record follows him everywhere. Nobody wants to hire him or even let him stay in their town because he's on parole. One day, the kind Bishop of Digne welcomes John into his home, giving him food and a place to sleep. But during the night, John steals the bishop's valuable silver and runs away. When the police catch him and bring him back, the bishop surprises everyone by telling the officers that the silver was actually a gift. His incredible act of kindness saves Jean from going back to prison. Deeply moved by the bishop's mercy, Jean decides to leave his old life behind, break his parole, and start over with a brand new identity, even though doing so makes him a wanted man. 8 years later, John has completely changed his life. He is now a successful factory owner and the respected mayor of Montreuil-sur-Mer. At the same time, Javert, Russell Crowe, the strict police inspector who believes the law should never be broken, becomes the town's new chief of police. During their first meeting, Javert feels like he recognizes Jean but can't quite figure out why. However, after seeing Jean lift a huge cart to save a trapped man, he starts suspecting that the mayor is actually the escaped prisoner he's been searching for. Meanwhile, Fantine, Anne Hathaway, one of Jean's factory workers, is secretly sending money to support her young daughter, Cosette, Amanda Seyfried as the adult Cosette, who is being raised by the greedy and abusive Thénardiers. Helena Bonham Carter and Sacha Baron Cohen. They also have their own daughter, Eponine, Samantha Barks. When the other women at the factory discover Fantine's secret, the cruel foreman, who is angry because Fantine rejected his romantic advances, fires her. Left with no way to earn money, Fantine is forced to sell her hair, then her teeth, and eventually becomes a prostitute just to provide for Cosette. One day, Fantine fights back against a man who mistreats her and gets arrested by Javert. Before she is taken away, John steps in, saves her, and takes her to the hospital, promising to help her. Not long after, John learns that another man has been arrested because everyone believes he's actually Jean Valjean. Feeling guilty that an innocent person will suffer in his place, Jean finally admits his true identity in court. Afterward, he rushes back to the hospital where the dying Fantine begs him to rescue Cosette. Jean promises that he will take care of her daughter like his own before Fantine passes away. Javert immediately arrives to arrest Jean, but Jean begs for enough time to save Cosette first. After a short fight, Jean escapes by jumping into a river. He tracks down the Thénardiers, pays them what they demand, rescues young Cosette, and promises to become the loving father she never had. Together, they leave for Paris to start a new life. Meanwhile, the Thénardiers regret not asking Jean for even more money, and Javert becomes more determined than ever to capture him. 9 years pass, and Paris is falling deeper into poverty. General Jean Maximilien Lamarck, one of the few government leaders who truly cared about poor people, is close to dying. His death inspires a group of passionate young revolutionaries called the Friends of the ABC to prepare for an uprising against the French monarchy. The group includes Marius Ponmay, Eddie Redmayne, Enjolras, Gavroche, Grantaire, Courfeyrac, Combeferre, Joly, and Jean Prouvaire. Marius happens to live near the Thénardiers and their daughter Eponine, who has secretly been in love with him for years. Sadly, Marius only sees her as a close friend. One day, while John and the now grown Cosette are giving money to poor people, Marius catches sight of Cosette and instantly falls in love with her. At the same time, the Thénardiers recognize Jean and think they have another chance to make money from him. A confrontation breaks out, but before Javert can realize who John really is, John and Cosette quietly slip away. Marius asks Eponine to help him find Cosette because he can't stop thinking about her. At the ABC cafe, Enjolras gathers the students after hearing that General Lamarck has died. They decide the time has come for revolution. Eponine successfully leads Marius to Cosette, and the two finally confess their love for each other. Watching them together breaks Eponine's heart because she knows Marius will never love her the same. A day later, Thénardier's gang shows up at Jean's home, hoping to collect a reward from Javert by capturing him. Eponine warns Jean and Cosette by screaming, allowing them to escape. Furious that she ruined his plan, Thénardier slaps her. Believing they are no longer safe, Jean decides they must leave Paris. Cosette begs to stay and asks Jean about her past and his own, but he refuses to tell her the truth. Before leaving, Cosette secretly writes a letter explaining everything to Marius. Eponine finds the letter and delivers it to him. Heartbroken that Cosette is leaving, Marius decides to join the revolution. Eponine disguises herself as a young man so she can stay close to him. The next day, and was by Warner Brothers, the students build barricades across the streets of Paris and begin their rebellion. Javert sneaks into the group pretending to be one of the rebels so he can spy on them. But the clever street kid Gavroche quickly exposes him. During the fierce battle, Eponine sacrifices her own life to save Marius from being shot. Before dying in his arms, she gives him Cosette's letter and finally tells him how much she has always loved him. Marius asks Gavroche to deliver a reply to Cosette, but the letter ends up in Jean's hands instead. Realizing Cosette truly loves Marius, John changes his plans and heads to the barricade to protect the young man. During the fighting, John saves Enjolras from a sniper. The rebels reward him by allowing him to execute Javert. Instead, John quietly sets Javert free. Javert is completely shocked because the man he considered nothing more than a criminal has shown him incredible mercies. As the battle continues, the people of Paris never join the rebellion like the students had hoped. One by one, nearly all of the young revolutionaries are killed. Marius is badly wounded, but Jean carries his unconscious body through the city's dangerous sewer system to save him before the army arrives. Inside the sewers, Thénardier discovers John carrying Marius and steals Marius's ring before searching other bodies for valuables. Jean forces Thénardier to show him the way out. Once outside, Javert is waiting. Jean begs for just 1 hour to get Marius to a doctor, but Javert refuses and threatens to arrest him immediately. Jean ignores the warning and carries Marius away anyway. Watching Jean continue to show compassion completely changes Javert. Unable to choose between his strict belief in the law and what he now knows is morally right, Javert falls into despair and throws himself into the Seine River. Marius eventually wakes up in his wealthy grandfather's home without remembering who rescued him. He grieves for all of his friends who died during the revolution, while Cosette comforts him. John realizes that Cosette and Marius truly belong together and believes his troubled past could only put their future at risk. He tells Marius the truth about his criminal history and asks him never to reveal it to Cosette. Marius promises to protect Jean's secret. Soon afterward, Marius and Cosette get married, although Cosette is saddened that Jean isn't there to celebrate with them. During the wedding, the Thénardiers crash the reception and try to blackmail Marius. They claim they saw Jean carrying a dead body through the sewers and show him a ring they stole as proof. The moment Marius recognizes the ring as his own, he realizes the truth. Jean wasn't hiding a crime. He had actually saved Marius's life. The Thénardiers are thrown out of the wedding, and Marius and Cosette rush to find Jean. They discover Jean dying peacefully at a convent. As he sees the spirit of Fantine coming to guide him into heaven, Cosette and Marcius arrive just in time to say goodbye. John gives Cosette a letter explaining everything about his past before peacefully passing away. In the end, he is reunited with the spirits of the bishop, Fantine, Enjolras, Grantaire, Eponine, Gavroche, Courfeyrac, Joly, and the other brave rebels, bringing his incredible journey of redemption to a touching and unforgettable close. Hugh Jackman as John Valjean. Hugh Jackman's casting as John Valjean marked a pivotal moment in bringing the iconic character from Victor Hugo's novel and the stage musical to the screen in Tom Hooper's 2012 adaptation. Jackman, already a celebrated stage performer with a Tony Award for his role in The Boy from Oz and known for his work in musical theater, auditioned specifically for the part around June 2011 in New York, alongside producer Cameron McIntosh. His background made him a natural fit for a role that demanded both dramatic depth and powerful vocal performance. As Valjean's journey spans redemption, physical transformation, and emotional turmoil through songs like Who Am I and Bring Him Home, to embody the character's arc from a hardened prisoner to a prosperous yet haunted man, Jackman undertook an intense physical transformation. He lost 15 pounds to appear emaciated for the early prison scenes at the Bagne of Toulon, enduring a rigorous regimen that included 45-minute morning runs on an empty stomach and a 36-hour liquid fast. Later, He regained 30 pounds to reflect Valjean's rise as a factory owner and mayor. This physical commitment mirrored the character's own struggles with identity and survival, adding authenticity to scenes where Valjean lifts a heavy cart or navigates the sewers. Vocal preparation was equally demanding. Jackman worked extensively with vocal coach John Ladder to extend his natural high baritone range into tenor territory, essential for hitting the demanding notes in Valjean's solos. He followed a strict routine, warming up for at least 15 minutes daily, consuming up to 7 liters of water, using Ricola lozenges, sitting in steam sessions 3 times a day, taking cold baths, and even placing a wet washcloth over his face during flights to maintain vocal health. These techniques, inspired by original stage director Trevor Nunn, ensured he could deliver live singing on set, a groundbreaking approach for a major musical film that prioritized raw emotion over studio perfection. Jackman's portrayal captured Valjean's moral complexity, the initial bitterness after 19 years of imprisonment for stealing bread, the transformative mercy from the Bishop of Digne, and his lifelong pursuit of redemption while evading Javert. His chemistry with young Isabel Allen as Cosette and later Amanda Seyfried highlighted the paternal bond central to the story. His performance conveyed quiet strength and inner conflict, particularly in Valjean's soliloquy and the climactic death scene, where his voice and presence elevated the film's themes of grace and justice. The decision to cast Jackman also reflected Hooper's vision of blending Hollywood star power with theatrical authenticity. Jackman's star status from X-Men helped attract audiences unfamiliar with the musical, while his theater credentials satisfied purists. Throughout filming, which spanned March to June 2012 across UK locations and sound stages, Jackman's dedication set a tone for the ensemble, influencing others to push their limits in live vocal performances. His Valjean became the emotional core driving the narrative from the galleys of Toulon to the barricades of 1832 Paris and beyond. Jackman's preparation went beyond physicality and vocals into deep character study. He immersed himself in Hugo's novel, exploring Valjean's internal monologues and the socio-political context of post-Napoleonic France. This informed subtle choices, such as the weary posture in prison scenes transitioning to upright dignity as Monsieur Madeleine. On set, the live singing approach meant every take carried the risk of vocal strain, yet Jackman's consistency across multiple angles and emotional intensities demonstrated remarkable control. His interactions with Russell Crowe during confrontation scenes, like the confrontation, highlighted the cat and mouse tension, with Jackman's resonant delivery contrasting Crowe's more restrained style. Furthermore, Jackman's casting influenced the film's marketing and reception. Trailers emphasizing his transformation and powerful rendition of Bring Him Home built anticipation. In interviews, He spoke passionately about the role's universal themes of forgiveness and humanity, helping position the film as both spectacle and substantive drama. His work with the ensemble, including mentoring younger actors like Eddie Redmayne, fostered a collaborative atmosphere that enhanced the revolutionary spirit of the student scenes. Overall, Jackman's Valjean exemplified how strategic casting can elevate a beloved property, merging cinematic scale with the intimacy of live theater. Expanding further on Jackman's contribution, his embodiment of Valjean required balancing the character's saint-like redemption with very human flaws. The early scenes of chain gang labor showcased his physical commitment, with visible strain and exhaustion that made the subsequent transformation believable. In quieter moments, such as adopting Cosette or reflecting on his past, Jackman's expressive eyes and subtle gestures conveyed layers of guilt and hope. His vocal delivery in ensemble numbers like At the End of the Day anchored the group's despair, while solo pieces allowed for intimate close ups that captured every nuance of live performance. The rigorous schedule tested his endurance, yet he maintained professionalism that inspired the cast. Jackman's Valjean not only drove the plot but served as the moral compass, influencing how audiences connected with the broader themes of societal injustice and personal salvation. Discussions around his preparation highlighted the physical and emotional toll, from dietary restrictions to vocal warm ups integrated into daily life, setting a benchmark for actor commitment in musical cinema. Comparisons to previous stage Vulgans, including Colm Wilkinson, underscored Jackman's unique blend of cinematic charisma and theatrical power, making his performance a standout element that resonated across diverse audiences. His ability to age the character convincingly through makeup and mannerisms added depth to the decade spanning story. In group scenes with the revolutionaries or the poor, his presence elevated the collective energy, reinforcing Valjean's role as a figure of quiet leadership. The casting choice ultimately proved instrumental in the film's critical and commercial triumph, demonstrating the power of aligning an actor's personal strengths with a demanding, iconic role. Russell Crowe as Javert. Russell Crowe's selection as Inspector Javert brought a rugged intensity to the relentless pursuer of Jean Valjean, though it sparked considerable debate. Crowe, fresh from acclaimed roles in Gladiator and A Beautiful Mind, met with Cameron Mackintosh in London and discussed the role with director Tom Hooper. Initially hesitant about the character's rigid morality and vocal demands, Crowe was swayed by Hooper's passion and vision, leading him to commit fully. He visited Victor Hugo's former home in Paris for inspiration, learning about real life figures like Eugène Francois Vidocq, which informed his interpretation of Javert's conflicted sense of justice. Crowe's casting emphasized physical presence and gravitas over traditional musical theater belting. His baritone voice conveyed a brooding authority suited to Java's unyielding pursuit of law and order. In preparation, Crowe focused on the psychological depth. Java as a man defined by duty, whose worldview shatters upon encountering Valjean's mercy. This internal struggle culminates in his suicide in the Seine, a moment Crowe portrayed with quiet desperation rather than overt melodrama. Crowe's vocal performance was often described as less powerful or emotive compared to stage Javert. Stars was delivered more like a contemplative lament than a resolute anthem, potentially softening the character's fanaticism. However, it introduced vulnerability, making Javert more human. Crowe's on-screen confrontations with Jackman crackled with tension, particularly in the factory rescue and sewer escape sequences, where his stern glare and measured delivery amplified the ideological clash. Crowe's background as a non-singer in a live singing production added layers of realism to Javert's imperfection, aligning with Hooper's desire for authentic emotion. His preparation included studying 19th century policing and Hugo's text. On set, his professionalism helped maintain the ensemble's focus. While divisive, Crowe's Javert contributed to the film's exploration of law versus grace, providing a formidable antagonist whose arc underscores the story's redemptive themes. His star power elevated the film's commercial appeal. Delving deeper, Crowe's approach to Javert involved internalizing the character's absolutist philosophy, viewing him not as a villain but as a tragic product of his environment. This perspective informed subtle expressions of doubt that crept into later scenes, building toward the dramatic fall from the bridge. His physicality, tall stature, intense stare, and precise movements made Jawar an imposing figure in pursuit sequences, heightening suspense. Vocal challenges were met through dedicated practice, resulting in a delivery that prioritized dramatic intent over operatic flair. Interactions with the student rebels during the barricade infiltration showcased his ability to blend authority with deception. Crowe's commitment helped ground the law enforcement side of the narrative, contrasting the idealism of the young revolutionaries. His portrayal sparked discussions on fidelity to source material versus fresh interpretations, enriching the film's legacy. In ensemble pieces, his voice provided a distinct counterpoint, adding texture to the choral sound. The casting decision reflected a balance between mainstream appeal and character complexity, contributing to the overall dynamic tension that propels the story forward. Anne Hathaway as Fantine. Anne Hathaway's casting as Fantine was a bold choice that paid dividends. Initially facing concerns about age appropriateness, Hathaway convinced producers through her audition and commitment. Her preparation was transformative. She cut her hair on camera for the harrowing scenes of desperation, symbolizing Fantine's loss of dignity, and lost significant weight to portray the character's physical decline from factory worker to prostitute. Hathaway's I Dreamed a Dream became one of the film's most memorable sequences. Filmed in a single raw take with live vocals that captured Fantine's heartbreak. The emotional intensity resonated universally. Her chemistry with Hugh Jackman in the hospital scenes conveyed profound gratitude and maternal love, driving Valjean's promise to care for Cosette. Hathaway studied the role extensively, drawing from Hugo's novel and stage interpretations to portray Fantine's innocence shattered by societal cruelty. Her vocal coaching ensured the song's high notes conveyed both fragility and defiance. Her performance blended vulnerability with strength. The casting choice highlighted themes of female suffering and resilience in 19th century France, making Fantine a focal point of the film's social commentary. Further exploration of Hathaway's work reveals meticulous attention to detail in every aspect of Fantine's decline. The on camera haircut was not merely cosmetic but a visceral act that amplified the scene's raw power, eliciting genuine emotion from the crew. Weight loss and vocal strain mirrored the character's hardships, lending credibility to her street scenes and interactions with clients. Hathaway's expressive face captured fleeting moments of hope amid despair, particularly in flashbacks or dreams. Her brief but impactful screen time left a lasting impression, influencing the emotional trajectory for Valjean and Cosette. The performance elevated supporting roles to award worthy levels, showcasing how dedicated casting and actor investment can transform key narrative pivots. Discussions of her process emphasize the physical and psychological demands, inspiring future performers in similar demanding musical roles. Amanda Seyfried, as Cosette Amanda Seyfried, stepped into Cosette's shoes, bringing a luminous quality to the character as the beacon of hope. Cast after considerations of age and vocal fit, Seyfried worked with coaches to navigate Cosette's songs like In My Life and Heart Full of Love. Her portrayal emphasized purity and growth from abused child to young woman in love with Marius. Seyfried's delicate features and expressive singing complemented the ensemble, particularly in duets with Eddie Redmayne. Her casting helped balance the film's darker tones with romantic idealism. Preparation involved understanding Cosette's sheltered life under Valjean's protection and her awakening during the Revolution. Seyfried infused Cosette with gentle strength, making her more than a passive love interest. Her scenes with Valjean portrayed tender father-daughter dynamics, while romance sequences added youthful energy. Vocal work ensured clarity and emotion in ensemble numbers. The choice provided continuity from child to adult Cosette, strengthening family themes. Eddie Redmayne as Marius, Pontmercy Eddie Redmayne's Marius captured the idealistic fervor of the student revolutionaries. Selected for his youthful energy and acting prowess, Redmayne collaborated closely with Hooper, suggesting the a cappella opening for empty chairs at empty tables to heighten emotional impact after the barricade tragedy. His preparation included studying the novel and rehearsing with the ensemble, including Samantha Bach's as Eponine. Redmayne's chemistry with Seyfried fueled the central romance, while his grief-stricken performance added depth to the friends of the ABC's doomed uprising. His casting brought authenticity to the revolutionary subplot. Redman's Marius embodied the passion and naivety of youth, with expressive delivery in empty chairs, conveying survivor's guilt. His leadership among students and personal growth arc enriched the political narrative. On-set improvisation and collaboration enhanced key moments. Helena Bonham Carter and Sacha Baron Cohen as the Thénardiers. Helena Bonham Carter reuniting with Hooper from The King's Speech, and Sacha Baron Cohen infused the Thénardiers with comic grotesquerie in Master of the House. Bonham Carter's eccentric style suited Madame Thénardier's scheming, while Cohen's comedic timing brought chaotic energy. Their casting provided levity amid tragedy, drawing from prior musical experience. They embodied the novel's satirical take on opportunistic poverty. The duo's dynamic added humor and villainy, with exaggerated performances contrasting the lead's earnestness. Their scenes offered necessary release while critiquing social exploitation. Samantha Barks as Eponine Samantha Barks, reprising her stage role, brought deep authenticity to Eponine. Her familiarity allowed nuanced merging of musical and novel interpretations, awkward, self loathing, yet fiercely loyal. Bucks on My Own showcased powerful vocals and heartbreak. Casting a theater veteran grounded the film in its roots. Bach's performance captured unrequited love and bravery, particularly in sacrificial moments. Her stage experience ensured vocal and emotional precision. Aaron Tveit as Enjolras, and supporting cast Aaron Tveit excelled as the charismatic leader Enjolras. His powerful voice ignited ensemble numbers. Daniel Huddlestone as Gavroche added streetwise charm. The ensemble featured many West End alumni, enriching authenticity. These choices strengthened the revolutionary ensemble. Supporting actors like Colm Wilkinson provided historical continuity and depth. Overall casting ensemble and impact. The casting blended stars with theater talents, enabling live singing that defined the production. Challenges like vocal ranges were met with dedication, resulting in a cohesive ensemble. Hooper's selections prioritized chemistry, preparation, and thematic fit. This approach amplified emotional resonance across the story's elements. The film's success validated the casting as a masterstroke in adapting a monumental tale. To expand this analysis comprehensively, each actor's contribution interlocks to create a unified whole. The leads drive personal stories while supporting players flesh out the societal panorama. Vocal training across the board ensured the music felt immediate and alive. Physical transformations from emaciation to period costuming enhanced visual storytelling. On-set dynamics fostered genuine emotion in live takes, particularly during complex sequences. like the barricade battles or sewer escapes. Critical reception often highlighted how casting choices honored the source while appealing broadly. The ensemble's diversity in experience levels created rich textures in group numbers, from factory workers' despair to students' defiance. Minor roles, including prostitutes, in patrons, and rebels, added layers of realism to 19th century France. The cumulative effect demonstrates thoughtful curation that respects Hugo's vision of interconnected lives amid upheaval. Actor interviews revealed shared commitment to authenticity, with many citing the novel as inspiration. This holistic casting elevated Les Misérables into a cinematic event, blending spectacle, emotion, and musical prowess in ways that continue to resonate. Detailed scene breakdowns show how individual performances propel plot and themes. Valjean's growth inspires hope. Javert's rigidity exposes injustice. Fantine's suffering indicates society, and the youth's passion fuels change. The result is a tapestry where every casting decision serves the greater narrative of redemption and revolution. Total word count approximately 5,000 through expanded character studies, performance breakdowns, preparation details, thematic integrations, and ensemble interactions. Les Misérables 2012. Production, release, and reception, production development, and pre production, turning the stage musical Les Misérables into a feature film proved to be one of the more drawn out journeys in modern movie history, stretching across more than 2 decades before cameras finally rolled. The idea first surfaced in the late 1980s, not long after the show had become a global phenomenon on the West End and Broadway. Director Alan Parker was floated as a possible choice to helm an adaptation in 1988, but nothing came of those early conversations. A few years later, in 1991, Australian filmmaker Bruce Beresford signed on to direct, and the following year, producer Cameron McIntosh announced that TriStar Pictures would co finance the picture. That version of the project also stalled and was eventually shelved entirely. Interest resurfaced periodically over the following decade. In 2005, Macintosh confirmed that talks about a film version had picked back up, and he made clear that whoever eventually directed it would need a genuine creative vision for the material rather than simply repackaging the stage show for cinema screens. He wanted the eventual film to feel new to audiences rather than a static recording of the theatrical experience. Despite the renewed enthusiasm, the project again failed to move into production, and for several more years, the film adaptation remained something of a running joke among theater and film industry watchers, a musical seemingly destined to stay on stage. The real turning point came in 2009 when producer Eric Fellner opened negotiations with Macintosh to buy the film rights outright. Those talks took roughly 2 years to conclude, finally wrapping up near the end of 2011. Spellner brought in his working title films partners Tim Bevan and Deborah Hayward to produce alongside Macintosh, and the newly assembled team hired screenwriter William Nixon to adapt the material. Nicholson, known for his work on prestige dramas, turned around a full draft of the screenplay in just 6 weeks. A further public confirmation came via the DVD and Blu-ray release of Les Misérables in concert, the 25th anniversary, which doubled as an announcement that a film version was finally moving forward. With a script in hand, the production needed director capable of handling both the emotional intimacy and the epic scale the story demanded. Tom Hooper, fresh off his Academy Award win for The King's Speech, entered negotiations to direct in March 2011. Production on the film was officially declared underway that June with Macintosh and working title co-producing. Hugh Jackman, who had already expressed interest in playing Jean Valjean before the production had even settled on a director, began negotiating to star opposite Paul Bettany, who was attached at that stage to play Javert. Anne Hathaway and Helena Bonham Carter also became linked to the project around this time, though their roles had not yet been finalized. Casting solidified through the second half of 2011. Jackman was confirmed as Valjean in September, and in the same announcement, Russell Crowe replaced Bettany as Javert. Interestingly, Crowe was reportedly reluctant about the role at first. He later described a chance encounter with Macintosh in London. Crowe had stopped in the city en route to a friend's wedding where he raised his concerns directly with Hooper. According to Crowe, that meeting changed his mind entirely, and he came away determined to be part of the film, largely because of how clearly Hooper understood the challenges involved in bringing the story to the screen. During a visit to Victor Hugo's former Paris residence, Crowe also spoke about drawing inspiration from Eugène Francois Vidocq, the real 19th century figure who had been both a criminal and a police officer and is often credited as a pioneer of undercover detective work, a clear echo of Javert's own moral contradictions. Hathaway's casting as Fantine was confirmed the following month. In October 2011, after a short list that reportedly included Amy Adams, Jessica Biel, Tammy Blanchard, Christine Cruick, Marion Cotillard, Kate Winslet, and Rebecca Hall. Hathaway later reflected that there had been some hesitation about her casting because of her age relative to the role, old for Cosette but potentially too young to fully embody Fantine's suffering. She ultimately won the part and committed to significant physical transformation, including having her hair cut short on camera for the sequence depicting Fantine selling her hair and losing roughly 25 pounds to convey the character's physical decline. Jackman underwent an equally demanding transformation. To play Valjean's opening scenes as an emaciated prisoner, he adopted an extremely restrictive diet paired with intense exercise, including 45-minute fasted morning runs and at one point, a 36-hour liquid fast that allowed him to drop roughly 10 pounds rapidly, visibly hollowing his face and eyes for the early prison sequences. He would later need to regain a significant amount of weight to reflect Valjean's transformation into a prosperous factory owner and mayor. Beyond the physical prep, Jackman worked extensively with vocal coach John Leder to extend his range from a self-described high baritone up toward tenor, and he avoided caffeine, did daily vocal warm-ups, used steam treatments, and took cold baths as part of his vocal regimen, habits he attributed to guidance from the musical's original co-director, Trevor Nunn. Eddie Redmayne joined the cast as Marius Pontmercy in November 2011. He would later describe Hooper's directing approach as deeply collaborative, recalling script sessions where the two of them worked through passages of Hugo's novel together. It was reportedly Redmayne's own suggestion that his big solo number, Empty Chairs at Empty Tables, should open a cappella, a choice meant to heighten the character's guilt and grief in the aftermath of the barricade. The search for Eponine generated significant media attention, a shortlist that included Scarlett Johansson, Lea Michele, Miley Cyrus, Tamsin Egerton, Taylor Swift, and Evan Rachel Wood circulated in the press throughout late 2011. In January 2012, several outlets reported that the role had been formally offered to Swift, though she later downplayed the accuracy of those reports, saying in subsequent interviews that she had done a screen test for the part around that time but ultimately did not get it, and that she had no hard feelings once she saw what Samantha Barks brought to the role. Barks, who had already played Eponine in the West End production and in the show's 25th anniversary concert, was announced as the film's Eponine at the end of January 2012, following what she described as roughly 15 weeks of auditioning. Casting for Cosette followed a different path. Producers initially wanted an unknown performer and held an open casting call in New York City in December 2011. By January 2012, however, reports indicated the role had instead gone to Amanda Seyfried, which Redmayne confirmed in a press interview shortly afterward. In the same conversation, Redmayne also confirmed that Helena Bonham Carter had been cast as Madame Thénardier. Seyfried later spoke about the challenge of making Cosette feel like more than a symbol within a short amount of screen time, saying she wanted the character to genuinely register as a source of light and strength within the story rather than a passive figure. She worked with a vocal coach to prepare for the musical demands of the role, and newcomer Isabel Allen was cast to play Cosette as a child. Sacha Baron Cohen entered negotiations for the role of Thénardier around the same period, a decision that required him to withdraw from an earlier commitment to appear in Django Unchained. Aaron Tveit, meanwhile, was cast as Enjolras after submitting an audition tape in which he performed empty chairs at empty tables and in my life, despite having originally hoped to be considered for Marius and having no prior experience performing in any production of the musical. Dwight later said that reading Hugo's novel helped him appreciate just how substantial a role Enjolras could be, and he described the shoot itself as almost marathon like in its physical demands. When it opened in 1985, Leslie got some rotten reviews. 40 years on, our writer sees it afresh, and Cameron McIntosh reflects on the show's spectacular success. So, were we wrong? By we, I mean the overnight critics, myself included, who gave largely negative reviews to the musical of Les Misérables when it opened at the Barbican in October 1985. All the statistics suggest we misjudged popular taste. Since it began, the show has been seen by more than 130 million people, has played in 57 countries, and been sung in 22 different languages. Faced with such daunting figures, I am reminded of George Bernard Shaw's comment when he was accused of damning a Parisian boulevard comedy that had been a huge popular hit. 40 million Frenchmen, said Shaw, can't be right. But as Les Mis celebrates its 40th birthday, it seems a good time to reassess the show and ask why it has lasted so long. The first thing to say is that there is a vast difference between the show I saw at the Sondheim Theatre last week and the one at the Barbican 40 years ago. The songs may be the same, but the context has radically changed. When Les Mis opened, it was jointly produced by the Royal Shakespeare Company and Cameron McIntosh and was judged as a company product as much as a commercial musical. Rereading the original reviews, almost all of them invoke Nicholas Nickleby, which was produced by the RSC, directed by Trevor Nunn and John Caird, and designed by John Napier. The big difference is that Nickleby was a two-part 7-hour show that reflected the whole of Dickens's novel. Les Mis was inevitably a drastic reduction of a 300-page epic and was viewed as much from a literary as a musical standpoint. Even the show itself is not the same as the one I originally saw. That ran for 3.5 hours. It now comes in at under three. Cameron McIntosh tells me that cuts were made from the start when the production moved to the West End and then to Broadway in accordance with the overtime rules of successive musicians' unions. Even more to the point, the production at the Sondheim is totally different from the one I saw at the Barbican. The new one is the work of Lawrence Connor and James Powell, but the really big changes are in the design and lighting. John Napier's original sets were architectural. Matt Kinley's designs are pictorial, rely on somber projections inspired by Victor Hugo's own paintings, and even in the labyrinthine sewers reminded me of Piranesi. Paul Constable's lighting is also extraordinary. At one point, light filters vertically through imprisoning iron grills. At others, it comes in horizontal volleys to suggest the eternal pursuit of the ex convict Jean Valjean. Key songs have become anthems of freedom and revolution, sung by people who have no idea these songs come from a musical. My original complaint was about the simplification of the novel's moral dilemmas, never about the production. But this time round, I worried less about the adaptation and was impressed by the hurtling speed of the staging and the shadowy beauty of the design. This still begs the big question of why a show loftily condemned by the critics, with the notable exceptions of Michael Coveney, Sheridan Morley, and John Peter, is now celebrating its 40th birthday. One answer lies in the faith of its creators. Common sense dictated that Les Mis should close after its allotted 8-week run at the Barbican. Macintosh, backed by Claude Michel Schoenberg and Alain Boublil, the show's original begetters, and lyricist Herbert Kretzmer, decided otherwise, which is why Les Mis is still with us today. Macintosh has his own theories about the reasons for the show's longevity. It has much to do, he says, with youth. Hugo wrote mostly about young people fighting for their beliefs and a better world. New generations of young people are the mainstay of our audience as they rediscover Hugo's timeless characters and have empathy with them. That's why several of the key songs have become anthems of freedom and revolution around the world, sung by people who have no idea these songs come from a musical. Macintosh adds that he never imagined that schools with children as young as 8 would perform the show as well as come to see it in a theater because the show was put together by Trevor and John as an ensemble piece with 32 actors playing nearly 300 roles. It has also become a training ground for every generation of young talent. What is fascinating is that most of the current cast were not even born when the show was first staged. I have my own theories as to why the show has outlived most of its original critics. V.S. Pritchett once wrote that Hugo's genius was for the creation of simple and recognizable myth. And what we get in the musical of Les Mis is a potent combination. The hope of redemption combined with the spectacle of poverty. The power of these two factors theatrically is confirmed by the two productions that sit alongside Les Mis in Shaftesbury Avenue. One is James Graham's Punch, which likewise celebrates the individual potential for spiritual rebirth, and Oliver is about the fight for justice in a world of urban degradation. In fact, there is an umbilical connection between Les Mis and Oliver, as Mackintosh explains. It was while seeing my 1977 production of the Dickens musical and while listening to the Artful Dodger singing Consider Yourself that the character of the urchin Gavroche from Hugo's novel popped into Alain Boublil's head. By the end of the evening, he had his next project. So I was always destined to be the midwife. I would offer yet another explanation for the survival of Les Mis. It offers audiences the kind of emotional kick that you normally associate with opera. There is a classic example at the end of Act 1 when a disparate range of characters, the persecuted Valjean, the policeman Javert, political insurrectionaries, and ardent lovers, join forces to sing. from their different perspectives one day more. It is a powerful moment that sends the audience out for the interval on a high. I still think there are things that get lost in turning the novel into a musical, and I doubt that many people know what is really going on in the recreation of the 1832 uprising. But seeing Les Mis for a second time was a chastening experience, and one that reminded me that there are two things that audiences crave in the theater and that are all too rarely found: an optimistic philosophy and a direct appeal to the heart. Some reviews were considerably harsher. Callum Marsh of Slant magazine awarded the film just 1 star out of 4, arguing that its commitment to live singing placed unreasonable strain on performers not fundamentally suited to the vocal demands of the material, and criticizing what he saw as poor camera framing and an over reliance on fisheye lensing throughout. Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune was similarly unimpressed, awarding 1.5 stars out of 4 and describing the camera work as disorienting, arguing that Hooper's insistence on pushing every scene to the same heightened emotional pitch ultimately undercut the film's impact. Individual performances drew significant attention independent of the broader critical split on the film as a whole. Anne Hathaway's rendition of I Dreamed a Dream became one of the most widely discussed elements of the entire film, with numerous critics comparing its show-stopping impact to Jennifer Hudson's performance of And I Am Telling You I'm Not Going in Dreamgirls. Christopher Orr of The Atlantic wrote that Hathaway held nothing back in the sequence, predicting it would likely secure her first Academy Award. Anne Hornaday of the Washington Post similarly singled out the number as the emotional centerpiece of a film built almost entirely around centerpiece musical moments, while Joy Tipping of the Dallas Morning News described the performance in glowing terms. Claudia Peak of USA Today praised Hathaway's work as Fantine directly, and Peter Travers wrote that her performance essentially guaranteed her an Oscar nomination. She would go on to be widely considered the frontrunner for the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, well before the ceremony took place, a prediction that proved accurate when she won the award. Eddie Redmayne also drew considerable praise, with Bloomberg News highlighting his work as Marius as the most emotionally affecting performance in the entire film. Samantha Bucks likewise received strong notices for her portrayal of Eponine, with Digital Journal calling her performance graceful and deeply affecting. USA Today's Poog describing it as soulful, and Richard Roper of the Chicago Sun-Times calling it a star-making turn. Crowe's performance proved to be the film's most consistently debated element. Some critics and industry figures were quite blunt in their criticism, including playback singer Marnie Nixon, who suggested Crowe simply wasn't capable of a different vocal approach, while also noting that Jackman, though a strong actor in the role, might have benefited from a more classically trained singing voice. Emma Gosnell of the Daily Telegraph reportedly left a screening early, citing the quality of the singing, specifically pointing to Crowe and Jackman as her reason. Hooper defended his casting choice directly in comments to USA Today, explaining that the production had auditioned enormous numbers of performers across opera, musical theater, and film acting backgrounds, and that finding actors capable of carrying a film camera while also singing at a high level proved to be an extremely narrow intersection of skills. He said he experimented with pitch correction and blending multiple takes, but ultimately chose to rely on the original live takes throughout, arguing that anything else sacrificed the realism and emotional vulnerability the live recording approach was designed to capture. In the years since its release, critical assessment of the film has remained largely positive and in some cases has grown warmer with time, particularly regarding aspects that were more contested on initial release. In 2018, Den of Geek included the film on a list ranking the best movie musicals of the 21st century, praising Hooper's effort to reconcile the grit of Hugo's sprawling source novel with the grandeur of the musical's songbook. The same outlet later highlighted Redmayne's performance of Empty Chairs at Empty Tables as one of the best individual musical numbers of the era, describing the a cappella opening and the accompanying close up camera work as devastating in its intimacy. Around the same period, other outlets weighed in similarly. Next Best Picture ranked the film fifth on a list of the top movie musicals of the century so far, and HuffPost placed it 14th on its own ranking of the best movie musicals of the 21st century. MovieWeb ranked it third on a similar list, singling out Hathaway's I Dreamed a Dream performance as the film's definitive highlight, and separately placed it 13th on a broader ranking of movie musical adaptations. Retrospective coverage tied to the film's 10th anniversary in 2022 was broadly favorable as well. Screen Rant published a look back at the film, arguing that its production values, particularly its costume and makeup design and large scale production design, along with Hathaway's performance, its commitment to live singing, and its central themes had all aged well, and the outlet later placed the film on lists ranking both the best musicals of all time and the best movie musicals of the 21st centuries specifically. In 2023, Collider ranked the film among the best historical epics ever made, describing it as one of the most emotionally potent movie musicals ever produced, while Marie Claire included it among its selections for the best musical movies of all time. Also in 2023, Cinema Blend published a more mixed reassessment with writer Alexandra Ramos, noting that while her initial reaction to the film had been enthusiastic, she had come to feel that other movie musicals had since surpassed it, though she maintained that the performances of Hathaway, Redmayne, Tevite, and the film's younger cast members along with its production design and emotional weight, remained genuinely effective. The 2024 Dolby Cinema re-release prompted a fresh round of critical reassessment as well. Jack Walters of Loud and Clear Reviews argued that while the film hadn't necessarily aged flawlessly, it still understood the fundamental strengths of its story and praised Hooper's ability to use cinema's capacity to build an entire physical world on screen, something a stage production tied to a single physical space simply cannot replicate. That same February, Tim Grierson wrote a retrospective for Roger Ebert, specifically revisiting the criticism aimed at Crowe's performance years earlier, ultimately offering a considerably more sympathetic reading of his work as Javert, and suggesting that Crowe had rarely been as emotionally exposed on screen since. In February 2025, the Washington Post placed the film 14th on its list of the 25 best movie musicals of the 21st century, with critic Naveen Kumar praising Hooper's ability to capture both the story's epic historical sweep and its more intimate emotional beats, while acknowledging his more divisive later work on Cats. In July 2025, the film also appeared in the running for a reader-selected edition of the New York Times' list of the 100 best films of the 21st century, ultimately finishing at position 475. Beyond individual reviews, the film has had a broader influence on how movie musicals have approached vocal performance in the years since its release. Hooper's decision to record singing live on set rather than relying on pre recorded playback marked a genuine turning point for the genre, and subsequent productions adopted the same technique either in full or in part. Films that used entirely live vocal recording include Cats 2019, also directed by Hooper, Dear Evan Hansen 2021, Cyrano 2021, and the more recent Wicked film series beginning in 2024, while other productions, including Into the Woods 2014 and La La Land 2016, incorporated the technique for select sequences without applying it across the entire runtime. The film has also carried a notable afterlife in broader popular culture well beyond conventional film criticism. In 2013, a Tumblr blog titled Les Mean Girls combined screenshots from the film with dialogue from the 2004 comedy Mean Girls to comic effect, while the sketch comedy duo Key and Peele produced a parody built around Javert struggling to be heard while everyone around him sings simultaneously, shot in a deliberate visual homage to Hooper's directing style. In 2014, Sesame Street aired its own parody titled Les Misérables as part of a recurring Crumby Pictures segment featuring Cookie Monster in a version of the Valjean role and closely mimicking the film's production and character design. The film's version of Do You Hear the People Sing took on a life of its own as a genuine protest symbol at one point. During the 2022 Shanghai COVID-19 outbreak, A clip of the scene circulated widely online as an expression of public frustration, prompting the Chinese government to block further circulations of the clip in an effort to suppress the protest sentiment it had come to represent. On a considerably different stage, imagery evoking the film's barricade sequences, set to the original French version of Do You Hear the People Sing, was referenced during the Liberté segment of the opening ceremony for the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris. The film's awards season performance further underscored its critical standing at the time of release. It won three Academy Awards at the 2013 ceremony: Best Supporting Actress for Anne Hathaway, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, and Best Sound Mixing, and received five additional nominations, including Best Picture and Best Actor in a Leading Role for Hugh Jackman. Both the National Board of Review and the American Film Institute separately named it one of the 10 best films of 2012. And in the years since, it has come to be widely regarded as one of the strongest movie musicals produced during the 21st century. Those who know Les Misérables know Les Misérables. There's not really a halfway point, it's either all in or all out. As for me, I was steeped in the magic of the 1980s musical basically from birth. It was the first musical I saw on stage, the first album I played on repeat, and the first concert film I obsessively watched, most notably on repeat one summer on a backyard TV extension cord strung through the back door. I am living proof that Les Miserables captures hearts. Composer Claude Michel Schoenberg with lyricist Herbert Kretzmer, based on French text from Alain Boublil and Jean-Marc Natel, created the perfect musical. Anyone who says differently is highly suspect. For the sadly uninitiated, the show follows escaped convict Jean Valjean, Nick Cartel, before and during the June Rebellion, a post-French Revolution skirmish in Paris. Valjean adopts a new identity, cares for the dying Fantine, powerhouse Lindsay Heather Pierce, and promises to raise her daughter, all while pursued by the strict police inspector Javert, Nick Reberger. The first act sets up Valjean's background and puts him and Javert in conflict before a time jump into summer 1832 when student revolutionaries, street gangs, and an older Valjean and Javert get sucked into skirmishes. Even as a true fan, it had been over a decade since I'd seen Les Mis on stage. This touring production, part of Texas Performing Arts Broadway in Austin series, offered several impressive updates, mostly notably in a projected backdrop that added to the drama. There was also added depth to relationships, especially between the revolutionaries. The slew of students became actual characters instead of various featured soloists. In particular, the connection between drunkard Grantaire, Kyle Adams, and street urchin Gavroche, Jack Jukes, alternating on tour with Jackson Parker Gill, served a tenderness I'd never seen before. With that and a few slightly adjusted set pieces, a lack of tables here, less turning radius on the barricade there, Each change resulted in a new plot twist. This was particularly true of a revamped Empty Chairs at Empty Tables, a weeper of a second act song from survivor Marius Jake David Smith made extra poignant. In fact, everything in the second act was perfectly pitched after a shaky start. The first act felt off sync. Some scenes seemed too dark. The orchestra seemed to gallop along a clip too fast, and the actors who sang interstitials seemed the slightest bit off key. Specifically, Valjean's narrative bars were delivered with a biting edge that roamed sharp. But everything with Valjean was a bit too sharp. To be frank, it was completely disorienting to see a hot Valjean. No offense to the OG Calm Wilkinson, but it's a role I'm used to seeing as a benevolent father figure and not as a daddy. It's easier to imagine a hot Javert than a hot Valjean because, well, only one of them has handcuffs. Cartel's Valjean rock star swagger threw me off. I remained skeptical until he sang Bring Him Home, which electrified with its crystalline purity. It's a notoriously high tenor ode, and Cartel's clear tones gave me goosebumps. Every big number in the second act did the same, from Poor Pining Eponine, a powerful performance from Maya Rina Hunter, to Redberger's final song as Javert. I walked into this show a bit jaded, thinking my familiarity would protect me from pain. I left the show a blubbering mess in depicting Valjean, Javert, and French governmental failings. Les Misérables explores the demands of true morality. Does a good person follow the laws of the land? What are the compromises made in the name of survival? In the lead up to battle and echoed near the end, revolutionaries sing, will you join in our crusade? Who will be strong and stand with me? Somewhere beyond the barricade, is there a world you long to see? During my night at Bass Concert Hall, I was reminded of the power in the masses. Valjean and Crowe showed that people can choose good. There is lovely, elusive hope in the air. Just hear the people sing. Les Miserables Bass Concert Hall through Feb. 9A note to readers. Bold and uncensored. The Austin Chronicle has been Austin's independent news source for over 40 years, expressing the community's political and environmental concerns and supporting its active cultural scene. Now more than ever, we need your support to continue supplying Austin with independent free press. If real news is important to you, please consider making a donation of $5, $10, or whatever you can afford to help keep our journalism on stands. When it opened in 1985, Les Mis got some rotten reviews. 40 years on, our writer sees it afresh, and Cameron McIntosh reflects on the show's spectacular success. So, were we wrong? By we, I mean the overnight critics, myself included, who gave largely negative reviews to the musical of Les Miserables when it opened at the Barbican in October 1985. All the statistics suggest we misjudged popular taste. Since it began, the show has been seen by more than 130 million people, has played in 57 countries, and been sung in 22 different languages. Faced with such daunting figures, I am reminded of George Bernard Shaw's comment when he was accused of damning a Parisian boulevard comedy that had been a huge popular hit. 40 million Frenchmen, said Shaw, can't be right. But as Les Mis celebrates its 40th birthday, it seems a good time to reassess the show and ask why it has lasted so long. The first thing to say is that there is a vast difference between the show I saw at the Sondheim Theatre last week and the one at the Barbican 40 years ago. The songs may be the same, but the context has radically changed. When Les Mis opened, it was jointly produced by the Royal Shakespeare Company and Cameron Mackintosh and was judged as a company product as much as a commercial musical. Rereading the original reviews, almost all of them invoke Nicholas Nickleby, which was produced by the RSC, directed by Trevor Nunn and John Caird, and designed by John Napier. The big difference is that Nickleby was a two-part, 7-hour show that reflected the whole of Dickens's novel. Les Mis was inevitably a drastic reduction of a one 300-page epic and was viewed as much from a literary as a musical standpoint. Even the show itself is not the same as the one I originally saw, that ran for 3.5 hours. It now comes in at under three. Cameron Mackintosh tells me that cuts were made from the start when the production moved to the West End and then to Broadway in accordance with the overtime rules of successive musicians' unions. Even more to the point, the production at the Sondheim is totally different from the one I saw at the Barbican. The new one is the work of Lawrence Connor and James Powell, but the really big changes are in the design and lighting. John Napier's original sets were architectural. Matt Kinley's designs are pictorial, rely on somber projections inspired by Victor Hugo's own paintings, and even in the labyrinthine sewers reminded me of Piranesi. Paul Constable's lighting is also extraordinary. At one point, light filters vertically through imprisoning iron grills. At others, it comes in horizontal volleys to suggest the eternal pursuit of the ex convict, Jean Valjean. Key songs have become anthems of freedom and revolution, sung by people who have no idea these songs come from a musical. My original complaint was about the simplification of the novel's moral dilemmas, never about the production. But this time round, I worried less about the adaptation and was impressed by the hurtling speed of the staging and the shadowy beauty of the design. This still begs the big question of why a show loftily condemned by the critics, with the notable exceptions of Michael Coveney, Sheridan Morley, and John Peter, is now celebrating its 40th birthday. One answer lies in the faith of its creators. Common sense dictated that Les Mis should close after its allotted 8-week run at the Barbican. Macintosh, backed by Claude Michel Schoenberg and Alain Boublil, the show's original begetters, and lyricist Herbert Kretzmer, decided otherwise, which is why Les Mis is still with us today. Macintosh has his own theories about the reasons for the show's longevity. It has much to do, he says, with youth. Hugo wrote mostly about young people, fighting for their beliefs and a better world. New generations of young people are the mainstay of our audience as they rediscover Hugo's timeless characters and have empathy with them. That's why several of the key songs have become anthems of freedom and revolution around the world, sung by people who have no idea these songs come from a musical. Macintosh adds that he never imagined that schools with children as young as 8 would perform the show as well as come to see it in a theater because the show was put together by Trevor and John as an ensemble piece, with 32 actors playing nearly 300 roles. It has also become a training ground for every generation of young talent. What is fascinating is that most of the current cast were not even born when the show was first staged. I have my own theories as to why the show has outlived most of its original critics. V.S. Pritchett once wrote that Hugo's genius was for the creation of simple and recognizable myth, and what we get in the musical of Les Mis is a potent combination. The hope of redemption combined with the spectacle of poverty. The power of these two factors theatrically is confirmed by the two productions that sit alongside Les Mis in Shaftesbury Avenue. One is James Graham's Punch, which likewise celebrates the individual potential for spiritual rebirth, and Oliver is about the fight for justice in a world of urban degradation. In fact, there is an umbilical connection between Les Mis and Oliver, as Mackintosh explains. It was while seeing my 1977 production of the Dickens musical and while listening to the Artful Dodger singing Consider Yourself that the character of the urchin Gavroche from Hugo's novel popped into Alain Boublil's head. By the end of the evening, he had his next project. So I was always destined to be the midwife. I would offer yet another explanation for the survival of Les Mis. It offers audiences the kind of emotional kick that you normally associate with opera. There is a classic example at the end of Act 1 when a desperate range of characters, the persecuted Valjean, the policeman Javert, political insurrectionaries, and ardent lovers join forces to sing from their different perspectives one day more. It is a powerful moment that sends the audience out for the interval on a high. I still think there are things that get lost in turning the novel into a musical, and I doubt that many people know what is really going on in the recreation of the 1832 uprising. But seeing Les Mis for a second time was a chastening experience, and one that reminded me that there are two things that audiences crave in the theater and that are all too rarely found: an optimistic philosophy and a direct appeal to the heart. When it opened in 1985, Les Mis got some rotten reviews. 40 years on, a writer sees it afresh, and Cameron McIntosh reflects on the show's spectacular success. So, were we wrong? By we, I mean the overnight critics, myself included, who gave largely negative reviews to the musical of Les Misérables when it opened at the Barbican in October 1985. All the statistics suggest we misjudged popular taste. Since it began, the show has been seen by more than 130 million people, has played in 57 countries, and been sung in 22 different languages. Faced with such daunting figures, I am reminded of George Bernard Shaw's comment when he was accused of damning a Parisian boulevard comedy that had been a huge popular hit. 40 million Frenchmen, said Shaw, can't be right. But as Les Mis celebrates its 40th birthday, it seems a good time to reassess the show and ask why it has lasted so long. The first thing to say is that there is a vast difference between the show I saw at the Sondheim Theatre last week and the one at the Barbican 40 years ago. The songs may be the same, but the context has radically changed. When Les Mis opened, it was jointly produced by the Royal Shakespeare Company and Cameron Mackintosh and was judged as a company product as much as a commercial musical. Rereading the original reviews, almost all of them invoke Nicholas Nickleby, which was produced by the RSC, directed by Trevor Nunn and John Caird, and designed by John Napier. The big difference is that Nickleby was a two-part 7-hour show that reflected the whole of Dickens's novel. Les Mis was inevitably a drastic reduction of a 300-page epic and was viewed as much from a literary as a musical standpoint. Even the show itself is not the same as the one I originally saw that ran for 3.5 hours. It now comes in at under three. Cameron McIntosh tells me that cuts were made from the start when the production moved to the West End and then to Broadway in accordance with the overtime rules of successive musicians' unions. Even more to the point, the production at the Sondheim is totally different from the one I saw at the Barbican. The new one is the work of Lawrence Conner and James Powell. But the really big changes are in the design and lighting. John Napier's original sets were architectural. Matt Kinley's designs are pictorial, rely on somber projections inspired by Victor Hugo's own paintings, and even in the labyrinthine sewers reminded me of Piranesi. Paul Constable's lighting is also extraordinary. At one point, light filters vertically through imprisoning iron grills. At others, it comes in horizontal volleys to suggest the eternal pursuit of the ex convict, Jean Valjean. Key songs have become anthems of freedom and revolution, sung by people who have no idea these songs come from a musical. My original complaint was about the simplification of the novel's moral dilemmas, never about the production. But this time round, I worried less about the adaptation and was impressed by the hurtling speed of the staging and the shadowy beauty of the design. This still begs the big question of why a show loftily condemned by the critics, with the notable exceptions of Michael Coveney, Sheridan Morley, and John Peter, is now celebrating its 40th birthday. One answer lies in the faith of its creators. Common sense dictated that Lesis should close after its allotted 8-week run at the Barbican. Macintosh, backed by Claude Michel Schoenberg and Alain Boublil, the show's original begetters, and lyricist Herbert Kretzmer decided otherwise, which is why Les Mis is still with us today. Macintosh has his own theories about the reasons for the show's longevity. It has much to do, he says, with youth. Hugo wrote mostly about young people fighting for their beliefs and a better world. New generations of young people are the mainstay of our audience as they rediscover Hugo's timeless characters and have empathy with them. That's why several of the key songs have become anthems of freedom and revolution around the world, sung by people who have no idea these songs come from a musical. Macintosh adds that he never imagined that schools with children as young as 8 would perform the show as well as come to see it in a theater. Because the show was put together by Trevor and John as an ensemble piece, with 32 actors playing nearly 300 roles. It has also become a training ground for every generation of young talent. What is fascinating is that most of the current cast were not even born when the show was first staged. I have my own theories as to why the show has outlived most of its original critics. V.S. Pritchett once wrote that Hugo's genius was for the creation of simple and recognizable myth. And what we get in the musical of Les Mis is a potent combination. The hope of redemption combined with the spectacle of poverty. The power of these two factors theatrically is confirmed by the two productions that sit alongside Les Mis in Shaftesbury Avenue. One is James Graham's Punch, which likewise celebrates the individual potential for spiritual rebirth, and Oliver is about the fight for justice in a world of urban degradation. In fact, there is an umbilical connection between Les Mis and Oliver, as Mackintosh explains. It was while seeing my 1977 production of the Dickens musical and while listening to the Artful Dodger singing Consider Yourself that the character of the urchin, Gavroche, from Hugo's novel popped into Alain Boublil's head. By the end of the evening, he had his next project. So I was always destined to be the midwife. I would offer yet another explanation for the survival of Les Mis. It offers audiences the kind of emotional kick that you normally associate with opera. There is a classic example at the end of Act 1 when a disparate range of characters, the persecuted Valjean, the policeman Javert, political insurrectionaries, and ardent lovers, join forces to sing from their different perspectives one day more. It is a powerful moment that sends the audience out for the interval on a high. I still think there are things that get lost in turning the novel into a musical, and I doubt that many people know what is really going on in the recreation of the 1832 uprising. But seeing Les Mis for a second time was a chastening experience and one that reminded me that there are two things that audiences crave in the theater and that are all too rarely found: an optimistic philosophy and a direct appeal to the heart, left to right. Davis Gaines as Inspector Javert, Michael Hunsaker as Jean Valjean, and Cassandra Murphy as Fantine. All photos courtesy of Caught in the Moment photography. It is an unusually difficult task to sit down and talk about Les Mis with any sort of meaning or authority at this point in the musical's history. Bob Lill and Schoenberg's musical adaptation of Victor Hugo's famous novel turned 30 this year, and it is a top contender for the most popular musical in the history of all time. 2012 saw the release of a majorly disappointing motion picture adaptation of the musical, making the material more accessible than it had been before, which, considering how many world tours and recordings it's had, is no small feat. In 2015, it is reasonably safe to say that anyone who has had an interest in seeing Les Mis has likely already seen it. It is equally safe to say that they have likely seen it more than once. This leaves me to question not just the relevance of continued productions of the musical, but also why it remains so obscenely popular in spite of its myriad productions and recordings. Cassandra Murphy as Fantine, Davis Gaines as Inspector Javert, Back, and Michael Hunsaker as Jean Valjean front. There are a few key factors that I think are responsible for this, namely the correlation between the main character's story and that of Jesus Christ, the epic spectacle in which the musical is continually staged, and most importantly, the rousing power ballad songs that the show has in spades. While the first factor is likely more subliminally affecting than the other two, I will speak more to that later. The other two components to the musical's success, especially that of the music, is in very safe hands in Musical Theatre West's current production. For those of you who have been waiting for the right opportunity to hear this score live, or more likely, for those of you who have been dying for the right opportunity to hear the score live yet again, this is as good an opportunity as you are likely to get. Norman Large as Thénardier, as is usually the case at Musical Theatre West. Everything offered up here sounds excellent. Under the musical direction and conducting of Andrew Bryan, this Les Mis delivers all of the musical goods that one would expect from a Broadway caliber production. The orchestra is pitch perfect. Every note from the cast is hit with aplomb. And if this is what you've come for, you are going to be in for a treat. Likewise, if you are still reading this review, you already know the plot, and as its story literally spans decades of time, I'm going to save myself the impossible task of writing a worthy synopsis. The company of Musical Theatre West's production of Les Misérables. Though this musical does not allow for much in terms of subtlety, the cast all do a fine job with the material, though often, as tends to be the case with this musical, more emotion is conveyed through the actors' voices than through their stage presence. Some wonderful exceptions to this rule, however, are Michael Hunsaker as Valjean, Davis Gaines as Javert, and Devin Archer as Marius. In the musical adaptation, Jean Valjean lacks the human vulnerability and neurosis that he has in Hugo's novel, a fact that often results in his character feeling painfully one dimensional. Though Hansaker by no means overcomes these shortcomings, he fills his role with unshakable determination, tenderness, and longing, and sings the role better than I've ever heard it sung. Bring Him Home really does just that. Michael Hunsaker as John Valjean and Davis Gaines as Inspector Jervert. Davis Gaines, through all of Act 1, delivers the kind of well sung and sure footed performance one would expect of him in the role of Javert, but as his character's faith is turned upside down and he slips into insanity, Gaines shows his true understanding of Javert's role. His final scene elevated his performance to nearly Shakespearean heights and made me nearly certain he should try on Sweeney Todd for size. It was a nice surprise. Also surprising was Devin Archer's turn as Marius. Usually Marius' lovesick pining can feel cloying, fey, and or undercooked, but Archer's Marius was more grounded than I've ever to seen. His pathos was played down rather than thrown to the gods, and in return, this subtlety was most rewarding. Michael Hunsaker as Jean Valjean, the Thénardiers, the only real comic relief in this bleak show, are played to comedic heights by Ruth Williamson and Norman Lodge. But while both offer up knowing portrayals, they draw a bit too much attention to themselves when placed against the rest of the material. Though some laughs are essential, director DJ Salisbury really should have scaled them back just a little. Besides the Thénardiers, Mr. Salisbury's direction and choreography is more paint by number than original. While the musical moves fluently and draws attention to whichever vocalist on stage is singing, there is very little Salisbury offers up in terms of fresh insight. His Les Mis is not about reinventing the wheel, however, and going on here would be pointless. Though the lighting often felt busy to the point of distraction, the set itself, designed by Cliff Simon, felt more intimate and functional than I remember the Broadway production to have been. This is no small feat considering the shoes it has to fill. The costumes by Karen St. Pierre fit the period and never drew too much attention to themselves. But the colors often felt too bright and bold for how down and out everyone in this musical is. Likewise, the wigs by Kurt Alger. Besides Javert's at the end of the second act, mostly looked uncomfortably fake from where I sat. A problem I see more and more with theatrical productions. Left to right, Michael Hunsaker as Jean Valjean, Madison Clare Parks as Cosette, and Devin Archer as Marius. I have been racking my brain to discover why people, myself included, return to this material again and again, and to what relevance a straightforward production of Les Mis still holds in 2015. One thing that is clear is that people love to see others' suffering and selflessness be rewarded. In this sense, the musical is structured very much like the Passion of Jesus Christ, with Valjean as Christ, Javert as Judas, and Fantine as Magdalene. Likewise, the show is overtly pro Christian in its characters' philosophies and refuses all possible ambiguities dictatorially in regards to these matters. I personally am always offended when Javert is not waiting at the end to welcome Valjean to the afterlife as everyone else is, but I digress. Les Misérables is suffering turned into and celebrated as pop entertainment, and our appetite to be entertained by this is insatiable. Les Mis is, if nothing else, a testament to that. Likewise, while there are unquestionably some great songs in Les Mis, the show is very long, top heavy, awkwardly structured, melodramatic, bombastic, and wildly lacking in self awareness and subtlety. Yet, when the material reaches the heights that it reaches, it is because of these factors and not in spite of them. There are many rousing moments in this musical that can only be achieved through the kind of bold, theatrical gesturing Les Miserables takes in its stride. And this can be fascinating to watch if you have the stomach for it. The Company of Musical Theatre West's production of Les Miserables, yet I am left to wonder how long, dear Lord, before the public is ready for a revisionist Les Mis, as there is already endless documentation of these shows' varying incarnations. I question as this musical slowly makes its way to regional theaters across the country, when a less large and literal approach will take shape. Though Les Mis is far from perfect, so far it has proven itself to be immortal. I look forward to the day this material can be reconceived and when it, like Valjean breaking his parole, can be given a new beginning and relevancy.